looks like your connection says it's yellow. Okay.
Oh, we're on.
Nice.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are around the world, folks. I know that probably the US election is overshadowing anything else that's going on at the moment, but we're really glad that you could join us on the PTGA Guides Inside series. This is an interesting one because it's a new topic area, in that we're trying to delve into some hard skills, I guess, that polar and expedition guides use. And we haven't really done this before. It's easy enough to talk about theoretical concepts and other learning areas, but trying to actually drive a Zodiac or lead a hike or anything like that is new terrain. So we're keen about doing this. Really happy to be doing this whole series, and in this particular one, I'm going to be simply interviewing or answering or asking some questions of our lead expert in this area, simply to just sort of talk about other issues and bring up any sort of pertinent PTGA issues that are involved with surf. But we're really happy to have Pam Le Noury joining us, and I just wanted to share a very brief story about how I came to meet Pam, because we've only met inception and creation. Had to make a board and an advisory board, and I had asked Maria, and we need to find some talented people who have a lot of expertise and can provide some really good advice. And he said, "Oh, have you heard of this woman Pam?" And I thought I knew everybody in the industry, and I hadn't. And he simply just said, she's amazing, she's super strong, the future of the industry. So I was like, whoa, that's some pretty high praise. And over the years, having Pam and appreciated her good and wise counsel to the PTGA, and then it's been an absolute honor to have Pam involved. And then, just like Gerard said this week, where people who are involved and keen in development of guides, regardless of the PTGA, Pam had come to us, the PTGA, and said, hey, why don't we how about trying a session on surf skills, because that's an area that Pam has expertise in, and here we are. And so it's great for this to come to fruition. And so without any further ado, I'll hand over to Pam. Good morning, Pam, or good afternoon, Pam.
Hey, Graham, thanks so much. That's a very, very kind introduction. Thank you very much. And thanks, Mariano. Before we get started, I wanted to just say a very big thanks to PTGA and Lauren, who's invisible in the background at 2 o'clock in the morning. I think I share the sentiment with everyone that we log on here once a week at the moment, or however often you guys do this. Not so much for the content, but just to see everyone. It's so nice to sort of share that little sense of community just for a moment in time with everything that's going on in the world. I know I felt a sort of loss of identity. You've lost your whole ship identity, and it's been a hard year, I think, for a lot of us. So this little hub has become like a really, really nice sense of community for all of us. So big thanks. I know Lauren was a lot of the brains and certainly the technical brains behind it. And so thanks for everyone, you, Graham, and all the PTJ for keeping it going. I know everyone sits there, I do, grinning from ear to ear just to feel part of the community again.
Agreed. Nicely said.
Okay, so Graham, what I already shared with you is that before I came to Expedition Ships, I was in working with small boats in South Africa in the diving industry and whale watching and that sort of thing. And one thing that's kind of unique that we deal with here on the east coast of South Africa is surf. And it's been such a handy skill for me and other skippers going into the expedition industry with a background like this. You really just always have that on the back of your mind. And there's so many nice things, parallels in our industries that I think the expedition industry can take from the surf launching sector in South Africa. So I'm going to share my screen here and go into my little PowerPoint. That's another little thing we probably not really missing. Can you see that? Hey, Graham, have you got my, got it?
Yes, yep.
Okay, cool. Yep. All right, so here is where this parallel industry comes from that I think we can take some lessons learned. This is where I live, just north of Durban, and you can just see it's thousands of kilometers of coastline, virtually unimpeded by any bays, islands, inlets, like there's just nothing. It's just thousands of kilometers of beach and thousands of kilometers of surf. So it's a surfer's paradise, and it's a small boat challenge. There's a couple of huge commercial harbors, but you don't want to be operating out of those. So anyone who's doing any small boat stuff is pretty much going through the surf. So this is my local launch site, actually just right where I live. And this is actually a commercial launch site. And you can just see, I wanted to lay out the zones of the surf. We're not dealing with surf like this, obviously, and we're not meant to be. But boats are dealing with this sort of surf here all the time, and they've become so adept at it, and it's really quite interesting. So you can just see that lovely big swell rolling in from the open ocean, and it breaks on the back, what we call the back line. This is where the surfers will be. It breaks once the bay gets shallow. So as soon as the bay gets shallow enough, then that wave, that big swell that rolls in, just breaks onto the sandbank. After it breaks, then it becomes a lot less powerful, but still can be quite powerful. And it's what we call the foamy. So here you've got the foamy rolling in, risk of cavitation, because it's a lot of air in there, if it's big especially. Powerful, but not as powerful as getting knocked by a big backline wave. And then that wave, that foamy, approaches the beach, and it might reform again into a wave on the beach. And that's what we actually deal with a lot, you know, like South Georgia and that sort of thing. So on the beach in South Georgia, we would not be dealing with backline, but we're often dealing with this shore break, dumpy shore break, those real strong wave action right on the beach, which is a whole different sort of kettle of fish and risks to dealing with those backline waves versus dealing with those shore break waves. But here is the same launch sites on a super calm day. So you still got the waves breaking on the backline, then you've got that mid zone. The mid zone is often really quite a safe space where you can, you know, bide your time, take your time. You've got control of your engines, and you can sort of wait and watch for your gap in the backline. And then the shore break, which we know is not really a great space to be holding a boat. It's quite hard to hold a boat on a shore break. A lot of energy, the thing's moving, and you don't have your engines in yet. So the mid zone where the foamies are is kind of nice. Backline is when you're punching the waves, and those are two different pieces of surf, the shore break versus the backline. Two very different situations to be dealing with, and so that's what I thought we would talk about, some of the technical aspects of. Okay, so that's what I was saying. You've got the backline where they break. You've got the mid zone, often a nice calm channel, foamy, it's not too energetic. Usually the water's deep enough, could be some rocks to watch out for, but it's generally a better zone. And the shore break, which is pretty tough on all of us. And when we talk about this backline wave, that's a similar in principle to, you know, just being out in the middle of a bay or out at, you know, sea, and there's, you know, an unexpected wave. Those principles are sort of similar, are carving waves there. Now, the boats here, they are especially designed for this, where Zodiacs aren't. And I just want to go through those differences, because you can't take someone from this industry straight into that industry. The boats don't have quite the same capabilities. So first of all, the boats here, they always have two engines. Obviously, you can't be holding your position in the mid zone and powering through the backline with one engine. So you've always got that redundancy, always got two engines. And it's kind of interesting because we will take, on our Zodiacs, we'll take 10 people with one, say 40 horsepower. And on these ribs here, we'll also take 10 people, but people will generally have 2 times 90 horsepower. So it's a massive amount more power that these boats are dealing with in order to have, you know, the power to go through those waves. The other big difference, and this comes in more than you'd expect, you know how under our boats it's kind of flat. We've got that inflatable keel, but it's more or less like a raft underneath. It's so flat. Where the boats here, they've got what we call a deep V keel, and it really is quite a sharp, deep V. And those just punch the waves so nicely. They slice through the waves, and it's really, it really takes up a lot of the pressure and the impact of the waves. That's quite good. The console for the driver's right at the front, so he wants to be, you know, right at the front, seeing what's going on. And you know, when you're going over a wave, you want to be seeing the next one from that position, not be like at the back, the last guy who gets to see what's coming next. And then another thing, and this was so funny, when I first came to Zodiacs, I was like, where are the foot straps? So everyone on these boats have foot straps that you just tuck your feet in so that you can't fall out the side of the boat. And I was like, why wouldn't we have foot straps? But because we don't have that deep V, we don't have that movement side to side. We're kind of like a raft, and you know, we're just not having as much side to side movement, and you know, we don't really need foot straps. But in the surf launch scenario, yeah, you'll see how super they come in. So they're both ribs, they both have outboard engines, they both, you know, dealing with surf in different ways, but these ones are really quite well modified to big surf. Any can I carry on there, Graham?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here is a little video. Okay, it's super old, slightly grainy, of a surf launch. He's left his shore party there. You can see the guys were swimming. And there's a surfer out there in the waves just to be annoying to everything else. And he's now going to go play around in the mid zone. He's a really good skipper. He knows the launch site well, obviously. And he's going to just find a nice little position to maintain in that mid zone to wait it out to get his gap through the back line. So the big key here, and this is similar to shore break, is punching those waves dead straight. You never want to be side onto waves. That'll easily flip your boat. You want to punch the waves dead straight. He's got the power to turn around here. So he's side onto the wave there, but it's sort of a bad angle of the camera. He's not as close as what he looks. And he's got the power to turn around here and then face up to the next foamy, punch the foamy, dead straight to the foamy, punch the foamy. The slightest little angle, I mean, we all know what it's like on the shore. The slightest little angle push your whole boat aside. So cutting those waves dead straight, you can take the most amazing amount of impact. You know, it's really, really quite amazing. So these foamies in this one, I mean, this is fairly robust surf. The foamies in this one, you can see they've got some power to them, but still so much better than getting hit by a backline wave or going into a backline wave. If he was caught in a situation where he had to go straight into backline wave, it's totally doable. You want to avoid it because you end up actually doing a lot of damage to the boat. That often some people's front consoles have been dislodged and washed, and usually the boat gets completely inundated with water, and then you're tons and tons heavier. And that's the same for us. You know, when you're on the shore break and you get full of water, now the boat's like twice as heavy, and so effectively you've got less power with all that weight. So you ideally avoid having a wave breaking right over you, but it's not the end of the world. And as long as you keep your nose dead straight to the waves every time you punch. So I'm going to fast forward this video a little bit, just so we can see that he gets out. I already know he does. Spoiler. And a second. Yeah, this was actually quite a. He really, took a lot of patience, I want to say, to just be like, no, I'm staying in the mid zone. I'm going to keep playing. I'm not going to rush it, because the temptation. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine the temptation is like, I've been mucking around in the shore break for ages. Everyone's watching. I'm not going to get out. I just want to go. but he's patient. Did you see there's surfers there as well? Just a bit frustrating. But he takes his time, he circles back, he keeps his position, because sometimes you want to keep your position, but you could be being pulled by sort of a side wash or being sucked back into the wave. So you occasionally do have to just circle around to get your position back. And there we go. Now I think he's going to take his break. And that's it. He actually didn't punch any big breaking waves. He played around, he punched the foamies, he bided his time in the mid zone, and then he weaved his way out. And that's kind of how they do it here every day. And it's kind of a cool way to operate boats. Now, let me just pause this for a second. I wanted to contrast that against how our boats handle the surf, which is different. This is in good old Pitcairn. So I'm going to go back again. So again, we want to be dead straight onto the waves, not side on. Side ons when it could really push you sideways, and then when you side on for the next wave, you could have your boat flipped. And boat flip in the shore break means injuries. So that's obviously what you want to avoid. Here we go. Just before you punch a wave, what happens in both industries is you give a little bit of gas. And that has two purposes. One is that it just straightens you out. So let's say, you know, the sea's moving you, your angle's gone slightly off. You give a little bit of gas, you face dead straight onto the wave, and that little bit of gas lifts your nose. So that's kind of nice. It means you can, you know, punch that wave with a little bit of a higher nose. There we go. Now, in my experience with Zodiacs and surf, when it ends up that you're having to deal with surf, this is when the accidents happen, not in the air, but this moment just here. And what I've seen happen is someone fall against the bow box and break their leg, and man overboards. So at this moment, people falling out. And you can just see, compared to how that other boat was punching the waves, how badly the Zodiacs, they don't cut through this wave at all. They get smacked right up, and then they land really hard on the other side. So two things. One is that you really have to tap off on the wave. Both boats, you tap off on the wave. So you accelerate a little bit to just, you know, hit the wave with a bit of gas and get that nose up and get your nose straight. But then you tap right off on the crest of that wave, because you don't want to go flying over and crash down on the other side. But even without too much acceleration, our boats, they really do crash land. You know, they don't have that deep beer hull that cuts into the water and breaks your landing. They kind of land like that. And that's when we get injuries or people falling out the side of the boat. So not a bad idea at all is if you're ever having to deal with surf, an unexpected wave, and you suddenly have to give the instruction, or you know you're going to have to go, you know, potentially have to go through something, is to get people sitting on the inside of the boat. If they're already fallen down on the inside of the boat, they can't fall any further, is the idea of that one. So they're just going to hit one more little wave and A for away. Okay, so if you were to be dealing with waves unexpectedly, and this, you know, this happens, it is the ocean, or also you have your lovely landing site planned, but you have to go to a different landing site for all the varying reasons that happen in our industry occasionally, and now you're dealing with this sort of surfy sort of situation that you weren't really expecting. My biggest thing is to be aware when there's swell around, because when there's swell around, there's potential for surf. And then be aware of any shallow objects. And so, I mean, I just can't think of the landing now in the Arctic, Graham, might know exactly what I'm talking about, but you sort of come around a reef and everyone's sort of coming around the reef, but maybe not really observing the swell on that reef. Obviously, most of the skippers are, but some, they just not have it really in their radar. So it's such a good skill to just always be like, shallow reef, a bit of sloppy swell, moving around. If there was just one slightly bigger swell, that's an area where we could really have some waves pick up. So another one is, say there's the calving, but you happen to know you're actually in a really shallow area. Even if you're really far away from the calving, but you happen to be in a really shallow area. So get out of that shallow area, because that is where the waves are going to jack up. That's where the surf's going to break, on those shallow reefs, those banks. So it's sort of having that back of your mind awareness of where the shallow patches are, where the reefs are, submerged little patches and rocks and stuff like that. And those are the places where there's some existing swell or potential for a calving. That's where a wave will occur. So that's always handy to know. And then, once you've always got that in your radar, you're always kind of keeping a little eye on things like that. Then you obviously want to chat with your whole team, the EL and the Zodiac Master and all the drivers really want to be in on this. And we're like, guys, if we're going to have to be dealing with some surf today to get back the ship, is it possible, or do we wait it out? But what can we do to make it safe? So things like, adding a safety boat where the surf is, doing dry runs, letting all the drivers just do a drive run, and see if they feel happy with things. People sitting on the inside of the boats, safer than them, sitting on the pontoon if there's possibly a crash landing. Smaller loads, sometimes you're like, okay, let's load for 6. And I'm a firm believer that that's up to the individual driver as much as anyone else to say, listen, I know this engine's so, I want to just take 6, and then maybe giving the passengers extra briefing on the beach in the Zodiac, etc., etc. So there's lots of little things you can do to mitigate this decision if you were going to have to deal with some surf that you hadn't planned for at the start of the day. Facing the wave straight on, and then accelerating, that's what I said, and then also get out of the surf zone. Once you've gone over that wave, it's not like, I did it. That's done. There's another one and another one and another one. So go, get out of that surf zone. Sort of have a map in your head of where that whole surf zone is, and don't stop until you're out. And that also means that if you did have a man overboard, and this would be a hard decision for any driver, but you don't want to stick around in the surf zone recovering your man overboard and put the whole boat and all the other people at risk. Because while you're mucking around, recovering someone, you're inevitably going to be side onto the wave. So getting out of that surf zone is so critical. And yeah. Okay, so here we go. Just pause that for a sec. I already know we did a test of this. For some reason, this video really lags. But this is a setup of where we had to deal with the potential of a little bit of surf. And so we did some mitigations as much as we could. And so I'll play this video, but sorry that I know it sort of lags on your end. So we had a buoy here marking what we thought was like the sort of the start of the area where people needed to start be vigilant. This here, hey Graham, can you see what I'm circling?
Yes, I can.
Nice. So this one is stop following the election results. Focus. So this one here is over here. That's a boat with passengers, and this one here is the safety boat that's going to come escort them. And this is the buoy that marks the channel. So here we go. Just nice swell on the inside here, and not really breaking. It's only breaking on that particular line out there in the channel. So the safety boat's all rigged up with man overboard nets, etc., etc. And a big one here is what I've seen people sometimes, they have this idea that they'll follow the boat in front of them, like, oh, the boat in front of them chose that path, so that's a safe path. But it's not so much about the path as the timing. So it's a big mistake to follow someone out. You have to pick your own timing, even if you follow the same route. If if you went through it at that moment, it probably means someone that followed you is going to hit the wave that you avoided, you got ahead of it, or whatever. So it's actually quite a good thing to remember. It's not just, you can't just follow someone else. You have to pick your timing for yourself. So yeah, you can see that it really is a bit of a jolt on the other side of the waves, unfortunately. And so that's your real potential for accidents, I would say.
Pam, can I ask you a couple of questions? I don't, yes. Because you're on screen share, Lauren's telling us that that I'm not on the screen. I just wanted to bring in a couple of things through the slides that you've had, and then we have a question, one of our first questions coming in. It seemed to me, just to recover that section with the driver who was going out through the big surf in your first video, a critical piece there to me seemed that while he was waiting in the mid zone, he was always moving, and I'm saying he because I'm assuming it wasn't a woman at the wheel. It could be, but in that mid zone, it seemed to me, and part of training that I have given people over the years, is that it is really important to keep that moving, and so that that brings in other skills of the fact that driver was turning around on a dime and doing little figure eights around the place, because keeping that momentum is far better than sitting dead in the water. Because as you said, if you suddenly decide, now I'm going, if you give it that jet of juice, then the first thing that happens is that we lighten the front of the boat and lift the front up, which doesn't happen. So far better to have that momentum going. I was also intrigued, I just wondered what you thought about, so in your pit can example, given you disclosed the statement that one of the bigger risks was breaking your leg on the bow box, which doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but going over those waves, if you were to do that again, the two people that were in that Zodiac at the time, would you have put them more forward to avoid the big lift, because you've got the weight of the engine at the back, the driver at the back, and the two passengers who are in there who are fairly well back as well? What would you do there?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The question of ballast, and how we in our industry so often use new staff members or sandbags as ballast in the bow. That's kind of a good question, actually. So the bow is going to be really uncomfortable for whoever's in the front. And so, I actually thought I wouldn't be going, I wouldn't be going through the surf if I was empty and it could actually totally flip me. I wouldn't be punching that wave. I would really rather try and spin and run back. And the Zodiacs really do turn on a ticky. So if I actually thought that boat would flip me vertical, which is really much, much harder than you would think, that's almost, it's really very, very hard to do that, actually. So no, I probably wouldn't put the staff in the bow, and I wouldn't want the extra weight of a sandbag necessarily to weigh it down, just because I'd rather have the power. That's me anyway, and I would rather have the staff be more comfortable and less impact at the back, or the passengers, or whatever the case may be. So no, I would probably do it again like it was. But it is a good question, because exactly it goes into how in our industry we often use people as ballast. And then back to your other point is yeah, exactly that. He keeps going, and you know how it can be. Everyone's got old engines, and if you're on low revs, they're dying. So you sort of set them up, you tune them up that you kind of need them to be on high revs to operate. And so these guys often circle. In a much calmer day, you might be able to just literally sit still and just wait. But even on the calmest day, there is some movement and sucking out. So you might even, on a super calm situation, you might even be sitting there slightly in reverse. But very often it's a churning mid-zone, safe, but churning, and you're moving.
Right. And I know you're going to get onto this and cover it coming up, but just to sort of preset, I guess, that you know, it seems to me, and even in my reflection of surf zones I've operated in the polar regions, most of them are just a shore dump without that kind of mid zone. So you're either out there or in there. But I do know that with some big surf days that I've been caught in or planned to be in places like the Falklands, I think the topography of the beach approach is such that the Falklands definitely offers some of that mid-zone area that you're talking about, where big waves will roll in, they'll have their break, and there'll be a mid-zone and then a shore zone. We'll just have a quick question from Gerard. We've had an influx of new guides, often with basic training only. How can companies develop skills in their staff when there is so little time for on-the-job training? Should companies demand higher standards of training before people join the industry?
Do you want me to take that, Graham, or do you want to talk in that one? Yeah, Gerard, I think every company has that conundrum. It's like your last staff member is the sort of giveaway training position. Ships cost, you know what it is, like 150,000 Rand a night to charter them, like if you wanted to do actual ship training. Keeping aside cabins for staff to do training, a lot of companies are doing that now. And then there's a couple of really great guys doing training now. Graham, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. But yeah, I know there's and the name's just totally escaped me, but please pop your name in the message there, in the chat box there. But there's a couple of guys doing really great training now, and they're independent of any individual company, and they've got Zodiacs and they do it. And then a lot of companies are offering some sort of in-house training. The hard part is that a lot of this training, you know, you get what you get on the day. I mean, I remember a long time ago, we had training in the Thames River in London, and it was kind of like, well, you know, it's not really preparing us for South Georgia in any way, shape or form. So that on-the-job training is so inevitable to a certain degree, qualified by experience in a way. Do you want to add to that, Graham?
Yeah, I really think the future for this industry, given the timiness nature of the polar regions, and to keep things moving on to the next thing, is to change the paradigm somewhat and take those small sessions. It doesn't need to be long. It's only maybe an hour added onto an excursion at the end, where if you have expertise within the expedition team, that becomes part of a company culture where, you know, the passengers, the guests are back on board, and then it's okay for the team to take an hour and take part in some training, and where passengers know that this is part of it. And, you know, the easy sell, I think, is to tell the guests that the reason we're doing this is because, you know, there's only one way for us to get better at this as guides, to look after your safety, and that's the easy hook. Is for us to practice, and the only place for us to practice is here, and that's why that's going on. I've talked to a number of ELs who work to this paradigm, and they say that, you know, even selling it to the guests as part of the recap, hey, you saw us doing this, this is why we're doing it, never ever had any pushback from guests who thought, you know, I was robbed of an hour's time at the end of it, because that safety and building guide skills is such a, you know, critical part of it.
Yeah. Graham, it's Ben and Pernell, Expedition Guides Academy. I know they've been so busy, of course not this year, but they've been so busy on the up and up, because it is so handy to have sort of independent companies offering a bit of this. And I know they've moved around and offered in different countries. So, you know, guys doing such a great job like that. All of us that have been in the industry for a long while have so much to give back, and creating those sharing moments while you work is so, I think it's nice for all of us, but it is really great if you can get budget for some pre-season training down in Ushuaia. And then the next question I saw here from Alex, but actually we're going to go into shore break now. Love the question about dealing with shore break. So actually I can go into that now if you like, Alex, Graham.
Perfect, let's do it.
Okay, so here, sorry, a huge apology for the nostalgia. I know we're all supposed to be there now. Yeah, it's pretty rough that hardly any of us are going to get down there this season. In any case, this is much more what we're dealing with, and I know I'll be sharing, this. I know how many absolutely amazingly experienced Zodiac drivers and expedition leaders are watching at the moment. So hats off to everyone, because I know we all have our different ways of doing things, but I think there's two main principles when it comes to two main schools of thought when it comes to how to deal with stern landing. So just going back, obviously the pointy end, you want to be facing into the waves. So when you've got this little surf dumping on the beach, you don't want that little surf pushing up against the transom, and the boat's going to be moving so much more than necessary when you've got waves hitting it on the transom, on the flat end. So much easier, even in relatively small shore break, even in just relatively small slopping, lapping on the shore, spin it around and start getting the practice in, I always say. And just have your nose facing out to sea. And your nose should always be facing any swell or surf anyway, so having it facing out is always handy. So in really nice calm conditions, I often like to just do stern landing, and just, you get your team into a nice flow with it, because different people have different strengths and different weaknesses. So what we talked about before was very much down to the driver making decisions on timing, on skill. It's all on his or her shoulders to do that. Where with shore break, actually, once you're connected to the shore party, it's all about their skill and experience, the communication between them, what they decided to do, what you all decided to do as a team, which way you decided to play it. And so the driver, you don't even have an engine when you're this shallow. So it really is about having a strong shore team that's well versed in it. So just a couple of pictures of a stern landing here. And then I'll go to, okay, so there's two main schools of thought of how to set up your stern landing. And they've both got their pros and their cons. And it really depends on who your shore party is, if there's big swell out there, factors like that. So it's something I always think it's nice to take a decision. The expedition leader or the Zodiac master might ultimately make the call, but it's really nice to chat to everyone. Like, what are you comfortable with? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Put the right drivers in. And for this, it doesn't necessarily have to be the strongest drivers. Again, the focus is really on a strong shore party that really knows what's going on the shore there, and holding that boat into the breaking waves potentially. So in one scenario, it's easier for the driver in a way, and they just come in straight up to the shore party, and you just turn a little bit as you get to the shore party, and they punch the nose around and spin the boat for you. And while they're spinning you around, you're already engine off, trimming up basically, and then you're in their hands. So you come right up, you just turn at the last minute just to get that spin started, so that's not so much work for them. The front guy, someone who's like tall and strong, Shirley, pushes the nose around, and then 4 people, ideally 2 on each side, will catch it and bring it in. And so that's quite a nice one. It's sort of like, it's easier for the driver. It's not too difficult for the driver. And if you've got a good shore party and you guys have got good communication, they just bring that boat in nicely to the shore, and it's like easy days. This doesn't work if it gets very deep very fast and you can't have people standing out there. And it doesn't work if you've got some potential backline waves, because you don't want to be facing the wrong direction with a wave behind you. So if the waves are all inside of the shore party or at the shore party, then it can work. And there's not this drop off where the shore party is going to go drowning, especially in the polar regions. Then this works nicely. But if it's a little bit bigger and backline waves, then there's the other chain of thought, which is when the driver comes in and turns around. Now he's facing any potential waves already. So anything bigger that's going to come from the outside, he's facing the right direction. He or she can accelerate, punch out through that, decide to change his mind and go back out again. So he comes, he turns around, and then he reverses back in. The risky part with this, which is not great, is that when you're reversing in, you're really going to hold that tiller really well. Otherwise, it wants to take you in different directions. So, you would just jam your whole body against the engine, and especially the tiller, so that it doesn't start veering you off in different directions. You got to go straight. Actually, you give quite a good amount of gas. But the not nice part about that is that you're reversing towards people standing in the water with your propeller. So here you really need the strong trust of the driver who knows what's cutting there, that they're not going to let that transom pull them and suddenly reverse in slightly wrong direction. And it happens very quickly that you get pulled, your tiller goes it's such a slight angle change that will turn that nose quite quickly, and then actually you start onto the wave anyway. So this takes much more skill of the driver, confidence of the driver, and the shore party having confidence in the driver. And they can even stay back on the shore until the drivers come much, much closer, and provided that he or she is nice and straight, then they can approach and catch him when he gets to shallows. And then the last little challenge with doing it this way is, of course, you have to trim while you go. So in the old days, with the two strokes, you'd have to turn it off and quickly pull it up. Or you can have it loose, that it's not locked down. And, when it's accelerated, it actually kicks up itself. So that was, but actually probably, I don't think anyone's got two strokes anymore. Anyway, I think we've all got electric trim and tolt. So as you're reversing in, apart from holding on the boat, you're also just trimming, and getting that balance of your trim right, so that, you don't trim out the water. And now you're still, far away from your shore party, and you've trimmed right up, and it's like, so that takes a bit more skill of the driver than the shore party. So I think most people go for this one, but this one is a handy go-to when you've got like a really well-oiled team and drivers and shore party, and everyone knows like that. So I'm sure everyone has their preferences, and it's quite nice to play with the options when it's nice and calm. Every time it's nice and calm, you can just play with these options. That one he just reverses straight back in. Here's a stern landing where he turned around, started reversing back in, and got caught. This is one from the tropics though, so it's different. People can go much deeper. Getting wet's not so much of an issue, but in this one, he started reversing in. He came in, turned around, started reversing in, and then the guys caught him.
That was great, Pam. I have a couple of questions. I really, really liked the frame of reference where you said for the spin landings about the driver being connected to the shore party. And I thought that really, that gave me a great image. And especially when you related it to the idea of, you mentioned also that people didn't need to necessarily be your strongest or best drivers, that they just had to get there to where the shore party was, and then once they were connected to the shore party, then as you quite rightly say, it's actually more the responsibility of a well-oiled team, a good teamwork and good communications as to what to do with the boat after that. which probably speaks to this question from Alex that you brought up just prior to going into that last screen share. What do we have to say to Alex in terms of, I've found that this leaves the shore team on the lee side of the boat that is beam onto the waves for a short period, and Alex sees far more close calls with this technique than with reversing. What do we think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree, Alex. That's when you're coming in and the shore party has to punch you around. There is that sort of not so slick, not so smooth turning around part, and if they're chatting and blah 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 and they don't spin you fast, there's that moment in time when you're beam on to potential waves and you're beam onto shore party. And so if those situations are cropping up a lot, then I would agree. Then I like to use the reverse technique. And again, it's just where the waves are potentially breaking in relation to where the shore party can stand, which speaks to the profile of the beach and the tallness of the staff. and you know, where the waves are breaking and where the staff can stand, which technique you might want to use. And it also might come down to the comfort levels and the skill of the driver. And then you say, okay, well, you know, we don't have a 2 meter tall staff member. We'll just have to, choose another way.
That'll be on the new recruiting guidelines for some people. One thing I've done using that technique with a Falklands beaches is training the team. So when that nose comes around, as you had shown on your slide there, Pam, with the front person who's strong and solid, pushing, giving, you know, helping that little spin on the bow, and the other people, the catchers, who as Alex said, are put at risk by being beam on, their job is to be well out of the way of that, so they're off to the side. And then the moment that spin happens and the boat is coming back in line, then they rush in to their position. And that's been my experience or my mitigation effort to stop them getting out. Because to push the bow around only takes one person who isn't at risk necessarily, and as Alex said, it's that sweep when the boat is sideways. If either the wave comes early and it hasn't been got, anyone standing side on there with their feet stuck in soft sand is at risk of going right underneath the boat or injuring their knee or leg or something like that. And so it's a very real,
absolutely.
Very real thing.
And in my amazing animation here, they you see where I put the people, like in this one, there's a gap. There's people on wide on both sides, and when the boat reverses, they can close in. Where on this one, you really want to aim for one or two people that are standing together, and it's always one main person, generally from a good rugby playing nation, that will be that person that you aim for, and that's who the driver will communicate with, and they'll be like, okay, come, and then that person is who you aim your nose for, and that's the puncher that will punch it around, and then everyone else must sort of stay out the way, and then fall in line once the boat's spun. You really only need one or two people that give that really big push that spins it around if you've got it going well. And if the boat already has some speed, a little bit of momentum, it spins really quite effectively if the driver gives a little bit of momentum. And I saw there's another question there, but so something that's worth keeping in mind is with this one is the tides. The weather forecast could deteriorate, so you drop everyone off and it's like absolutely pancake, but then it starts whooping up while you're there. So it's obviously good to keep your eye on the weather and the forecast, but the tides as well make such a big difference. So if where I put the green circles, if the tide, the water level was in these areas of quite shallow gradient, you're not going to have a big dumpy shore break. So if the tide was lower than in the image or higher than in the image, it's actually just probably going to be lapping on the shore. Whereas the tide changes, and if it's at the level of where you've got a steep bank, that's when, you know, suddenly you went on your walk and you came back and you're like, oh, what happened? And it's like really, dumping on that beach when you've got a steep beach and it's really dumping. It's quite nasty. And it really just could be a moment of the tides. So it's worth having, the state of the moon in mind. How big is this tide going to be? And when you're doing your operation originally, if you notice there's a drop off there, or if there's a berm behind you, like a steep part behind you, it's like, oh, if the tide gets there, things could get a little bit more nasty. It's a big tidal range today. It's full moon. Let's actually just, and you can actually potentially wait it out. If it's a nasty steep section of beach and it's a big tidal range, it's something you could actually potentially wait out.
That's great. Pam, one thing, a question from Ben from the EGA, the people that you were trying to identify before. You had me confused.
Okay.
I thought I knew what you were talking about, but you kept talking about two guys who are running this thing. It's like, well, technically EGA is one guy
I say
and one girl.
Guys, but I mean guys, meaning I'm a,
So apologies. But anyway, Ben has brought up option 3, which I wasn't sure, and I hadn't talked to anyone in the industry to see if anyone was still using it because of electric engines, which was to charge in on the back of the wave and just run up the beach going high and dry. And I'm sure you've done this plenty of times, again, with with electric, with manual lift engines, because you could leave the lock off and then the sand would just kick the engine up, so it was no problem. But what do you think about that as an option these days with electric engines?
That's such a great question. I actually didn't know anyone was really doing that in the expedition industry. I mean, done it like sort of on occasion, as Grum says, when you can unlock the engine and it can kick. So that is the only way to come ashore here in Durban area, Durban, Mozambique. That's actually exactly what they do. You come in on the back of a wave. You've got big waves breaking behind you. You're in the trough, but you're kind of on the back of the wave in front of you. You mustn't overtake it. I didn't add a video of this, but it's actually sometimes more challenging in the launch. So you're sitting on the back of the wave in front of you. Slow down a little bit as it breaks, because the wave actually slows down as it breaks, and you don't want to go over the breaking wave, even the foamy, because you cavitate there, so you lose a lot of your speed. So you want to keep your speed up, stay in the sort of smooth water, and then so slow down a little bit as the wave breaks, and then ideally you want to time it that wave is breaking on the shore, and that's when you hit the shore. But you need a lot of speed to, in our case in Durban, you need a lot of speed to come right up the beach and fully out of that surf zone. The last thing you want to do is mess that up and land on the beach with a new wave right behind you. That is a mess. So you jump over the wave that hasn't broken, and the wave breaks on top of you. So it's quite hard, and that's why it's not done with Zodiacs that much. One, because we don't have that huge amount of power. Like I said, these boats are having 180 horsepower for 10 people on a rib, and we're having 40 horsepower for 10 people on a rib. So these boats hit the beach and they go sliding right up the beach, and they're well clear of the surf zone. So we have done that a few, especially like with the two-stroke engines. Now, funny enough, they modify the engines here. They, even with the electric trim and tilt, they take a pin out so that they can actually kick. And so they're modified again for the beaching. So Ben, I think that's, and Pernille, I think that's so cool if you've been playing with that technique and mastered it in a way with Zodiacs. Because you'd really need very specific circumstances to get that right, where, with only the 40 horsepowers that we have and the trim and tilt issues. But it's definitely quite a good one.
For me, through the Midlands, that was the go-to. Certainly at Bailey Head, with the slow roll, would come in and then just dump on the beach. That if you came in on the top of that, and I'm sure that's where, seem to have an unstable internet connection. I'm sure that's where Ben's referring to, because I know
that's exactly where we've kind of done it as well.
So that's another option as well. I'm interested, another question here from Pernille, the other half of EGA. What's your take on gear, waders versus dry suits for drivers and shore staff during surf landings? Because that seems to be certainly some of the incidents that I've observed or been part of or know about from shore party have, as Alex pointed out, have been positional errors where they've been hit or gone under the boat, but then also where people walk off the drop off and they don't have proper water sealant, and they're either suddenly very heavy in waders or about to become very cold because they're now soaked through.
So that one's a good one. Often a lot of the fleets, maybe they don't necessarily have dry suits, and so people are in waders. It really sucks, as you know, being in waders and the water going in. So that's a huge consideration. If the people are going to be having to stand deep enough, you don't want to be standing deep enough that the water can go into your wader. And with the breaking wave, you really want the protection of a jacket so that you really don't want water coming into your wader. So in the ideal situation, you've got those tall people in the deep also in a dry suit. I mean, that's first prize, of course. But not, I mean, it's also sometimes personal preference. People don't like a dry suit. And then a key one is having those, the neoprene waders. I don't know if anyone else has a problem, but like if I would just start floating away if I was wearing the neoprene waders. So you want the vinyl, I would want the vinyl waders, which are colder, but otherwise I'll just get lifted up and floated away. And then also having those kayak style life jackets. You don't want the pop-up life jackets if you're going to be standing, in the shore break and then every 5 minutes things going off. So those are all your considerations. And please feel free to add in any comments or suggestions that you have on the gear as well there, Pamela. And then Rupert said they have a cool technique, which I've seen sort of in the Seychelles and stuff. They deploy an anchor and they reverse in. Yeah, and that's what's nice about that is that the anchor holds the nose, you know, so it's holding your nose out to sea, and then you reverse in. And people do that in the tropics a lot. Like if you're alone in your boat and you want to come on shore, and you anchor and you just let it sort of almost drift in, and the anchor is always going to hold your boat out of the wave. Key point though, tether your anchor to the very, very, very center front of the bow, not like, oh, to the side edge of the bow, then it's going to hold your boat and all those waves are going to catch you. Where if you tie to the center, that's going to hold your boat straight into any waves.
That would, Pam, that would seem to me fairly contingent on obviously the beach profile that you mentioned. You know, Rupert's probably talking about Svalbard, a lot of even gradient approaches there, Falkland Islands kind of thing, but the average Zodiac anchor chain, you know, probably 20 feet off the beach at St Andrews, it's probably too deep. It probably wouldn't grab until you were pretty much almost on the beach, worth thinking about. But also on that, it seemed to me with the range of options that you got to with the dress and safety equipment for shore staff, brings us to the obvious issue of, you know, if in the polar industry with mass tourism, if you're considering or embarking on a surf landing, that one of the first questions someone needs to ask situationally, of course, is, do we need to do this, or is this part of our charter on this day? Have our guests bought into this level of risk if it is risky, or is it just standard operation? And it also goes to the point that if you're going to put staff in that kind of risk, then the company or you as an EL need to make a decision. Do we have adequate safety equipment? And that's not just, oh, everyone has a dry suit because they might not fit, or, oh, we have loads of neoprene waders, therefore it is safe. It seems to me that was historical paradigm. It seems to me in this day and age, as professionals, those decisions probably need to be more sophisticated, that you look at it and say, well, yes, we have loads of neoprene waders, but that's fine, except if you're Pam, who's going to float out to sea like a champagne cork. Or we have neoprene, we have neoprene waders, we can do a surf landing when one of your staff is now sinking rapidly on the drop off at Gold Harbour, because their neoprene waders are now full of water because they didn't have a water seal. I just, an incident like that, I just don't think would be acceptable at all.
I'm so glad you circled back to that, because I really, really wanted to emphasize, we're not, the Zodiacs aren't well suited to punching big waves. They're not ideally suited. We should never plan an operation that would be punching waves. This was more about the fact that how it's done when there's an operation, a parallel operation that has to obligatorily do that all the time, what we can learn from them, and if you ever get caught out and you're having to punch waves, what techniques you could use. But it's absolutely not somewhere where you should be starting your operation knowing that you're going to have to punch waves. It's just this day and age, those days are gone. You shouldn't be starting at that level. It's just that it happens. It is the ocean. And there's a question from Phil here, and I just wanted about the approach to punching a wave. And I just wanted to, we're gonna wrap up actually shortly, but I just wanted to quickly go back to one slide here about punching waves. Okay, so in here, so now this person's gonna have to punch a wave. He or she doesn't have to go punch those waves in any hurry. They can stay here. The waves are not breaking where this driver is now. They're breaking there. They're not breaking here. So it's really, really, and the drivers here, they will watch, if it's like a so-so day, they will spend 30 minutes, you can imagine, everyone standing on the beach, talking, oh, you know, timing, saying, oh, there's 7 waves and then there's a gap. Oh, every sort of 5 minutes there's a really big wave, and there's a lot of waiting and watching that goes on. And then when they go, it's so much on the timing. So there's not, you must remember that mid zone is often in, you know, inside of where the waves are breaking is a relatively stable location. It's usually a very specific zone where the waves are actually breaking. And so there's no obligation to go, now I've started, I must charge out and continue unimpeded to get to those breaking waves. Like, you just take your time, bide your time, work that mid zone, wait, and you might find a gap like in the one video I showed you. But then when you do have to punch a wave, you want to be dead straight, that little bit of acceleration to lift your nose and make yourself dead straight, slow down on the top so you don't crash land too hard on the other, and then do it again for another and another wave until you get out of that surf zone, which you should very much avoid in the first place.
It's been great, Pam. I know Lauren has put word out for any final questions. Certainly from me, and Pam, you can wrap up as you feel you need to. Just want to thank Lauren again. At this point, it's 2 o'clock or now 3 o'clock in the morning in Australia, and Lauren's been up running this stuff from behind the scenes and keeping this going. So thanks, Lauren. Really, to me, a couple of key issues through this whole discussion, I think, is in this day and age, you know, if making that decision of, can we do this and do this safely? Do we have the skills within the team to do this and the equipment to do it safely and answer to things that may go wrong? It's absolutely incumbent on a company or an EL, if you're even considering working in these surf zones, to know that skills and training are in place and that the right equipment is in place. I feel in our level of maturity in the industry that there's no place for sort of making it up and having some half-assed equipment that doesn't work. I said at the beginning of this that this was probably the first time PTGA has tried a more hard skills topic area with these things, and I'd really appreciate if anyone's watching this live or later on, that if you think that this sort of thing worked and had value, then let us know through some message, because we have this forum that the PTGA can run more of these sorts of things and cherry pick some of these other sort of meta skills of a bigger area, which is of course Zodiac driving in its whole, but we can cherry pick some of these extra skill areas and try to do more in this area. So we'd certainly appreciate any feedback. If it didn't work and it was a waste of your time, then that's fine. You can let us know that as well. But certainly on behalf of PTGA, Pam, and I'll hand over to you, I'd just like to thank Pam for her expertise, again, even bringing this up to the PTGA and saying, hey, let's have a crack at that. We really appreciate that, Pam, and thank you.
Cool, thanks, Graham. Obviously, so fun for me, and as it would be, I'm sure, for anyone, to just get to talk about something that you've loved and you've done. So, you spend so much time doing. We all love it, and we all love talking about it. So it's really, really a privilege to talk about it with you. I hope people enjoyed it, and most of all, like I said, just so nice to have the sense of community. And Graham, Lauren reminded us to give a little shout out to Alison Cusick and Heather Torkelson. Amazing. They're going to do the talk next Tuesday about how to deal with social media. So that'll be a really, really great next one that I'm looking forward to. Thanks so much, Graham and Lauren in the background. Don't go watch the elections, everyone. And yeah, we'll miss you all and can't wait to see you all next week.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Lauren.